Hello, this is Tom Lombardo, Director of the Center for Future Consciousness and the Wisdom Page, and this is the Psychology of the Future, Part 3. Learning, Memory, and Knowledge. Progress, far from consisting in change, depends on retentiveness. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. George Santayana. Learning is the acquisition of knowledge, and memory builds upon learning. But memory is not a literal record of the past, but an active, creative, interpretive, categorizing, meaning-seeking, selective, integrative, value-imbued, continually restructuring process providing an ongoing understanding of what is being learned in the present as well as what has been learned in the past. Memory provides both relative psychological stability to our consciousness as well as a foundation for our self-identity. It provides a context for our experience of the present. The experience of the present always is influenced and interpreted by the past. But memory is also the foundation for growth. Learning and memory is in fact an evolution of evolution, usurping genetics. Changes can accumulate more quickly, that is, over an individual lifetime than across or between lifetimes. It is the basis of individual and cultural evolution. Learning and memory is also the basis for our expanding temporal consciousness and foresight and anticipation. As our awareness of the past develops, our sense of the future develops. We anticipate based upon what we have learned and remembered from the past. A key distinction in learning is between deep versus surface learning, which is a continuum. Deep learning is necessary for the development of wisdom as well as for personal growth and development. Surface learning at one extreme is learning without understanding, tending to be fragmented, where nothing changes in the deep psyche, where there's no application value, where learning takes place without thinking and without self-reflection. Deep learning at the other end of the continuum is learning with understanding, involving synthesizing big pictures, penetrating and reorganizing core values, concepts, and beliefs. Deep learning will have application value. Deep learning entails thinking about what you're learning and self-reflection. Deep learning is usually intrinsically motivated and active, and deep learning is supported by the virtues of love of learning and thinking. It is important to try to facilitate deep learning, and we can do this through thinking about what we're learning, comparing the elements together, over-learning, connecting into our personal experiences, debating the ideas with other people, creating out of what we have learned, explaining and teaching and conversing about it, using it in action and in problem solving. In summary, memory of the past acquired through learning but selectively structured and interpreted is the knowledge foundation for both present and future consciousness. Deep learning is the key to ongoing life transformation and essential to flourishing and the development of learning. Thinking, understanding, and consciousness. The highest possible stage in moral culture is when we recognize that we ought to control our thoughts. Charles Darwin. All knowledge begins from perception, but perception is perspectival, that is always from a point of view, and so consciousness and knowledge is always from a point of view. Theories which build on perception are selective, interpretive, and integrative explanations of our perceptual experiences, and they indeed are also from a point of view. Paradigms involve the combining together of a theory with a way of life. A worldview is a theory or a paradigm of the totality of reality and what is good and how to live. Humans have a psychological inclination to frame their understanding in the form of stories. Grand narratives which embody worldviews are stories about reality. Grand narratives provide a framework for historical and future consciousness. They describe, explain, and evaluate past, present, as well as prescribe the future. In our present time, there are multiple theories, paradigms, worldviews, and grand narratives of the past, the present, and the future. There are also personal narratives, that is, stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, providing meaning and purpose to our lives. There is an ethics and psychology to our beliefs. The belief in the truth and value of our narratives and connecting both the personal and grand narratives together significantly motivates human behavior, giving hope and optimism to our beliefs and to our actions. But there are problems with commitment, including being closed-minded, lack of growth and flexibility, and hence, in the ethics of belief, we are morally obligated to evaluate what we believe. We're responsible to the virtues and values of learning and thinking. This has psychological value for us because by evaluating what we believe, it invigorates growth, deep learning, flourishing, and wisdom. Directing the flow of consciousness. There is a moral imperative that we should take responsibility for our thoughts. There are multiple explanations as to why humans have so much difficulty controlling their thoughts, and there are multiple methods that we can use, in fact, to try to develop a better control over our thoughts, including cognitive therapy, critical thinking practices, mindfulness and meditation, self-reflection and standing back from our consciousness, which generates increasing objectivity and centeredness, changing our personal narratives. Thinking has many different purposes and functions. Thinking is a conscious mental activity involving the creation, interconnecting, and evaluation of our ideas and beliefs. Thinking is transcendent to both perceptual knowledge and memory, often involving hypothetical, imaginative, and abstract contexts. We create theories, worldviews, narratives through our thinking. It is a highly evolved psychological capacity. In fact, we can think about our thinking and evaluate how well we are thinking. Thinking, in fact, is a skill involving standards and virtues, for example, that can be understood through the principles of critical thinking, including virtues such as humility, courage, autonomy, integrity, honesty, perseverance, fair-mindedness. In fact, the skill of thinking reflects a moral development or character or virtue within us. In particular, there is thinking about the future, and there are levels of excellence in thinking about the future, such as whether one is imaginative versus habitual, optimistic versus pessimistic, systematic versus fragmented. There are many functions, though, to thinking about the future, including anticipation or prediction, evaluation, inspiration, guiding, controlling, and creating the future. Thinking about the future is prescriptive. Thinking about the future involves developing theories and narratives about the future and comparing them, developing visions, scenarios, and narratives about the future. Thinking about the future is a foundation for generating multiple possibilities, and also thinking about the future is involved in the development of strategies and plans. In summary, consciousness, understanding, and thinking, including thinking about the future, are perspectival, contingent, and relatively chaotic and uncontrollable, yet indeterminately self-reflective, self-expansive, self-evaluative, self-integrating, and self-improving, achieved through the practice of a set of cognitive virtues. Imagination and creativity. Every work of art comes into being in the same way as the cosmos, by means of catastrophes, which ultimately create, out of the cacophony of the various instruments, that symphony we call the music of the spheres. Wassily Kandinsky. Imagination. Imagination is the possibility space and the freedom of the human mind. It is the ability to create and manipulate mental images or hypothetical realities in our conscious mind. It is derived from, but it is not limited to, perceptual experiences and memories. And imagination serves as the basis of foresight, visioning, scenario building, science fiction. Evolution and creativity. Creativity emerges out of imagination. Creativity was originally thought of as a gift of the gods or God, but we find creativity in nature. There are levels of emergent novelty and unpredictability in the world around us, and humans are participatory within this creative process. And our increasing understanding of natural creativity leads to greater creativity in us. Knowledge, again, is power. And with humans, creativity is becoming a self-conscious process. There is a psychology of creativity. For example, there is the theory that creativity goes through 4 stages. Preparation, which involves hard work and study, incubation, then illumination and insight, and finally verification. Another theory of creativity from Arthur Koestler's book, The Act of Creation, is that creativity involves bisociation, which is bringing together 2 ideas or elements that previously had been seen as totally unrelated or disconnected. Another psychological theory of creativity is it involves a combination of processes from the right and the left brain, from the synthetic and analytic sides. Another view is that creativity is connected with a personality type that is inclined toward adventure, risk, courage, and self-actualization. As a general theory of creativity, creativity involves problem-solving, hard work, persistence, discipline, and often frustration, but balanced with chaos and play. That it involves a balance of convergent, focused activity with divergent and chaotic activity. It also involves a balance or interaction between individual effort and collective social stimulation. Creativity in the future. Understanding creativity is a way in which evolution is evolving, a way in which innovation is being innovated. Heightened future consciousness, indeed, is the desire and capacity to create the best possible future. Create the best possible future. Contributory factors to creating a best possible future involve the spirit of adventure, courage, hope and optimism, discipline and tenacity, the creating and recreating of goals, the love of learning and thinking, cultivating imagination, and having a sense of personal growth and self-transcendence. In summary, creativity involving a balanced synthesis of oppositional qualities is the making of order out of chaos, which often involves as a prelude the making of chaos out of order. The self and self-narrative. People often say that this or that person has not yet found himself, but the self is not something that one finds, it is something that one creates. Thomas Zaz. The nature of the self. The self is the agent, center, integration, narrator, audience, and coordinator of consciousness. There are levels to the self as outlined in Antonio Damasio's book, Self Comes to Mind. At the primary or basic level is the core self, which is the body feeling the body in the world as a foundation of the self. But layered on top of the core self is the autobiographical self, which involves the core self being contextualized in terms of ongoing memories and anticipations, where the self is experienced as a narration, being continually created and recreated. The autobiographical self brings reflection, anticipation, and deliberation into the experience of the self, producing a future-focused self. Hence, self-consciousness is an ongoing experience self-narrative that the self tells itself about itself as both author, character, and thirdly, audience, giving meaning, purpose, and coherence to life, connecting past, present, and future. We can evolve our personal narrative. The personal narrative is the foundation of the autobiographical self. It is the basis from which we draw ideas, memories, experiences to interpret our ongoing consciously experienced life. Wilson suggests that the personal self can be edited or changed, which will produce long-term psychological changes within us. As a general exercise, we can write out our life as a book, identifying key chapters and key themes, which will raise to heightened self-consciousness our personal narrative. And indeed, in doing so, perhaps we can reinterpret our past. Within this process, we can also identify a future personal narrative and, in fact, an ideal future personal narrative and rewrite it. Rewriting the ideal future self-narrative or personal narrative enhances self-awareness, self-responsibility, self-empowerment. It brings greater meaning and purpose to life, and it helps us to direct our self-growth and inspires us even more so in our aspirations in our lives. As an assignment, articulate to yourself an ideal future personal narrative that is centered on the growth of wisdom, that is the cultivation and practice of the virtues described in this three-part presentation, and that if followed will facilitate flourishing in the future both for yourself and for the world. As a basic summary point, I am evolution, self-conscious, purposeful, and evolving. I create myself through the ongoing, future directional, self-reflective story that is my personal narrative, real and ideal. Then I tell myself about myself. Within the context of the story, the grand narrative, I tell myself about the world. The life of wisdom. Believe those who are seeking the truth, doubt those who find it. Andre Gide. He who searches for wisdom is wise. He who thinks he has found it is a fool. Al-Farabi. Wisdom defined. Wisdom can be defined as the highest expression of self-development, the synthesis and application of all the virtues of heightened future consciousness. It is the continually evolving understanding of and fascination with both the big picture and personal dimensions of life, of what is important, ethical, and meaningful, and the desire and creative capacity to apply this understanding to enhance the well-being of life, both for oneself and for others. The centrality of wisdom. Wisdom integrates all of the virtues of heightened future consciousness. In fact, you could ask yourself how the various virtues I have been describing fit into the previous definition offered of wisdom. Wisdom also is central in that it is at the center of the ideal future self narrative that we should construct for ourselves for our ideal future. Wisdom is the means to well-being, the good future, and flourishing. And finally, the development of wisdom is the preferable direction for the future psychological evolution of humanity. Wisdom faces forward. I've presented an evolutionary future-focused vision of wisdom, where wisdom connects the past and contemporary knowledge with the thoughtfulness, hope, ethics, character, and creativity needed for the future. It involves an expansive synthesis of temporal consciousness, combating the excessive narrow presentism of today. We have, throughout our history, many grand narratives. What are humanity's grand narratives today? Do we possess any credible or inspiring ones for the future of humanity that resonate with the positive evolutionary possibilities for us? Given our history, we find a contemporary pluralism of competing narratives as an expression of our ongoing process of purposeful psychosocial evolution. What I would suggest as a grand narrative is the idea of an age of wisdom based upon an evolutionary future-focused theory of wisdom. Our mega crisis today is primarily ethical, psychological, and social. We need a positive approach and vision that defines the good future, dynamic and holistic, aligned with the virtues of wisdom, that is aligned with the vision of how to improve humanity, which will provide a grand narrative context for our own personal narratives and lives, which in essence will be that we should be contributing to the age of wisdom as our central moral imperative. In summary, a future-focused, evolutionary vision of wisdom should be the guiding light for our personal development and our future psychosocial evolution. And that is the end of part 3 of the psychology of the future.